Good morning. It's April 8th, 2020, and we are in day 12 of our quarantine here in Colorado. And so we're getting along fine. As I look out the window across the street to the grade school that's across the street from our house here in Craig, it's a beautiful bluebird day, as we call it here in Colorado. And we've had a lot of those. Yesterday, fortunately, I was able to get out and enjoy some sunshine. I walked both of our dogs pretty long distances yesterday, and so that was kind of nice to get out of the house and enjoy the nice spring weather that we are indeed having. This morning, we're going to kind of finish up our series here on the Christian's responsibility or the reasons why a Christian should be obedient to civil authority. I was reading this morning in the New York Times about kind of a little mini rebellion that's going on in Idaho. They're calling it the Liberty Movement, and there's even a local sheriff out there that is, I guess, no other way to put it, disobeying the stay-at-home order that their governor has issued out there as well. I have not really heard of any issues here in the state of Colorado. I think people are taking this pretty seriously. Colorado, by the way, has been hit fairly hard by the coronavirus. Fortunately, here in Moffat County, we have not yet. I did read another article this morning in the New York Times about how the virus is now beginning to hit rural communities. I know yesterday there was a lot of talk on the news about that they were kind of seeing I don't know if you'd call it a flattening of the curve in New York City and other large metropolitan areas, but I think we're beginning to see a rise in rural communities. And here in Moffat County, we are a very rural community, and so it'll be we're just praying that it's not too severe. I know we have some positive cases, but as far as I know, I have not heard of anyone in Craig or in Moffat County that has been hospitalized yet. Now, I know over at Steamboat, they've had a little bit of an outbreak at one of the nursing homes over there, which is, of course, very concerning. So we want to be remembering to pray for them. If I could just give everyone a word of encouragement, it would be to practice the social distancing. I know it's hard to do that. We're so used to being with one another. But if I could just encourage everyone to stay at home as much as possible. I know Sherry and I are trying to do that as much as we possibly can. I have asthma. I don't have it severely. Although I've struggled with it a little bit more this spring than I normally do. So Sherry is not letting me go anywhere. I'm not going in any stores or anything like that, which has been a little bit different. So anyhow, well, let's look at our verses for today. And so if you want to open your Bibles, we're finishing up here in Romans chapter 13, and I'm going to read verses 5, 6, and 7 because that's what we're going to focus on this morning. Verse 5 says, "Therefore it is necessary to be in subjection not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. For because of this you also pay taxes, for rulers are servants of God, devoting themselves to this very thing. Render to all what is due them, tax to whom tax is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor." And we'll end right there. Well, the last reason, we've been going through these reasons, the last reason that a Christian should obey their civil authority or whoever is in leadership politically over them is because of conscience sake. Paul says it right there. He says it is necessary to be in subjection not only because of wrath, in other words, not just because of punishment. So that was one of the reasons for fear of punishment. You don't want to be punished. You don't want to suffer the consequences of violating the law. But also, more importantly, as a Christian, I think, for conscience sake. We are to submit to civil authority for our own conscience sake. And really, That's also for the Lord's sake. If you turn to 1 Peter chapter 2, Peter has kind of a little bit more detail. He kind of fills in on this. If you turn to 1 Peter chapter 2, and we'll begin reading in verse 13. And it says this, and I think this is an important distinction. He says, "Submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether to a king as the one in authority or to governors as sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and the praise of those who do right. For such is the will of God, that by doing right you may silence the ignorance of foolish men." We're to do this for our conscience sake, but also as part of our witness to non-believers. If we are violating the law, for example, right now, everyone, not just churches, are being asked to stay at home, to practice social distancing. And so the question is, some churches are continuing to meet, and they're not implementing some of these social distancing things. My question to those pastors would be then, what is your witness to your community? What is the witness in your town? I know we here at Sovereign Grace Community Church definitely want to be a powerful witness for Jesus Christ in our community. If we decided to violate the very clear instructions of our local government and also our state government, that would be a poor witness. And that's what Paul is talking about here. And that's what Peter is talking about. He says, submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human institution. As long as we're not being asked to do something that is clearly against the mandates of Scripture, then we should do that. Whether it's a king who is in authority over us, a county commissioner, a sheriff, a governor, whoever, we are to be in obedience to them. And he says that in verse 14, or to governors, as sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and the praise of those who do right. Peter again is kind of re-emphasizing what Paul says about God has sent these men and women, placed them in authority for the punishment of evil and the praise of doing what is right. I've seen some comments online here in Colorado about our governor. Our governor is a homosexual, and many Christians have a problem with that. I would not obviously support him, but I am going to support him in doing this. And I also have an understanding that despite his lifestyle, God has placed him in authority here in Colorado. And so when I absolutely can, I am going to obey him, especially in this health crisis that we're looking at right now. And so he goes on here. Now, I want us to look at these next verses, going back to Romans chapter 13. And he says, the next point that he makes, now this is not one of the reasons. Remember we said there were two reasons here, or two responses that the Christian has. The first response is we're to obey the government because God has ordained them. Secondly, we are to pay taxes, all right? And look at what he says here in verse 6. Because of this, you also pay taxes, for rulers or servants of God, devoting themselves to this very thing. This is why we pay taxes. We pay taxes so that the laws are enforced. We pay taxes so that we have good roads. We pay taxes so that we, like across the street from us, we have good schools, and so on and so forth. This is why we pay taxes. And so, some Christians will argue, well, I'm not going to pay taxes. And I don't know very many people that say this, but there are some that argue, no, I'm not going to pay taxes because our government supports abortion. And yes, it does. And I do have a problem with that. I'm not comfortable that my tax dollars go to support Planned Parenthood, for example. But I also am to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Trust me, in the first century, they were paying taxes to the Roman government, and there were things that the Roman government that was doing that was very non-Christian. But Jesus said to his disciples, whose picture is it on this coin? And it was Caesar's. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. So we have an obligation, we have a responsibility as Christians to do that, to pay taxes. Now he goes on, and I want us to focus on this last verse, verse 7. owe nothing to anyone except to love one another. We are not to owe taxes. We're not to owe a debt. If we can avoid that, we're to love one another. We're to demonstrate love even to those that are outside of the fellowship of the church, that are non-Christians. He says, render to all what is due them. I'm sorry, I skipped ahead to verse 8. Render to all what is due them. Verse 7, tax to whom tax is due, custom to whom custom. Custom was a form of tax that you paid back then. Fear to whom fear, and then honor to whom honor. I believe as Christians, we are to honor the offices that people occupy. I remember when Barack Obama was president, many Christians had a problem with him being president. And I remember numerous times having conversations with people and saying, yes, I did not vote for President Obama, neither time. But we are to honor that office. He is President of the United States. Donald Trump is President of the United States. And we're to honor that office. We're to honor him as president. Also in our state, Jared Polis is our governor. So we are as Christians to honor that office, to be respectful. It doesn't mean that we have to always agree, and we don't. There's many things that we don't agree on, but we have to go about that in a respectful way, respecting the office that God has placed them in. And so as we're going through this time here where we're being asked as churches to do things really differently than we've done or that we're used to doing here in the United States, we have to keep in mind, first and foremost, the gospel. And we have to be witnesses. And part of that witness is to be law-abiding, respectful citizens. I want our local officials here in Moffat County and in Craig to know that they can count on Sovereign Grace Community Church, that even though they may not be a believer, that they know that we are seeking the good of our community. Obviously, part of that good, the biggest part of that good, is the spreading of the gospel. But we do want to be law-abiding citizens. I hope that this study has helped you understand our obligations as Christians. Join me here again tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll have we'll have a few devotionals over the next few days. This is, of course, the week of Easter, of Resurrection Sunday. I don't like to call it Easter. And Friday is, of course, Good Friday. Remember, we will be having a Good Friday service here on, or not here, but on Facebook Live on the Sovereign Grace Community Church of the Yampa Valley's Facebook page. Please join us at 6 o'clock for that. I will also have some devotionals over the next few days, specifically about the resurrection and the death of Christ and how that applies to our lives. Thank you so much for joining me this morning, and I just pray that God blesses you today. Thank you.